Thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you all for being here. I'm talking a little bit about that my internet connection is unstable. Can you hear me?
No, we can't hear you. It's funky. We're talking.
It's a little glitchy. Can you hear? No?
No, you're going in and out.
Okay. I'm gonna try to today, and the connection is spotty. Oh, I'm gonna try to turn off my camera. Is this better?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the Latinx activism and solidarity. So I was really happy to hear Trustee Gabriela talking about the solidarity that we need now for the movement. As a sociologist, as something that isn't relegated to the past, but as something a legacy in the systems and the structures of society. And so I'm also just interested in the connection and how different parts of, I should say, and I know that Professor de Klerk also mentioned this last week, but when we're talking about Latinx, we're talking about the entire Latin American and Caribbean diaspora. So that's 21 countries. That is a lot of diversity. And they all have their own socio-historical forces to consider, their own and cultural struggles. So I am in no way trying to conflate the movement at all. It is a very intricate system, and all the countries and nations that are involved are unique. They're not monolithic by any means. There isn't one movement, event, or one person who could fully represent the complexities of Latinx activism, just like there isn't one way of being a Latinx person today. That being said, I am going to focus on the ideological overlaps between all of the nations that consider themselves as Latinx, because at a certain level, they did consider that they shared in this, this felt sense of political, social, and economic oppression. And if I were to simplify Latinx activism history to only a few key concepts, I would say, and I've listed them here, that it's really about this focus and fight for human rights as they felt them, the search and preservation, socio-cultural identities, and national as well as global liberation movement. And I know that the history of Latinx activism is far-reaching, and I'm trying to keep this to 15 minutes. So I'm going to be focusing today on the Latin American 60s, which is where you see a lot of this activist effort coalesce in the larger Latin American region, and from which we can draw connections to contemporary society. So next slide, please. Okay, so within the larger Latinx movement, we have the Chicano movement, or Chicanx activism. And I know Professor Gamboa went over this in a lot more specificity last week, so I'll try to keep this brief. But the 60s and also part of the 70s were a pivotal time for Chicanx resistance. They opposed things like racism and unequal opportunities for the Chicanx community at the time that were systemic. And by systemic, I mean they become part of this institutional reality of society. For instance, it was in politics, in the media, and the amount of, or lack of representation and the amount of stereotypes of Mexican Americans and Chicano on film It was in education with the issue of access and opportunity. It was even in the military and warfare. So it was insidious. It was all over. And, you know, it's like Ibram Kendi says in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Once something becomes institutionalized, it takes an active will to break out of that system. And so the focus of the Chicano movement was just that, to try to break out of an unjust system and try to build a more equitable for all. And so on one end, you have Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, who were leaders in the United Farm Workers Association. And they were this critical spark for the Chicano movement because they really underscored this basic right to organize around a cause that you believed in. And they motivated an entire generation of Chicanx youth that could align to that in some way. Now you have this cause that they feel tied to and they feel tethered to. And so it motivated them to take socio-political action as well. And then like other countercultural groups in the 60s, the Chicano movement really focused a lot on anti-Vietnam and anti-war efforts. And so they protested the war. And aside from protesting the war itself, they protested the disproportionate amount of death of Chicano GIs and the treatment of veterans once they returned to the United States, because they still experienced a lot of discrimination and a lot of racism, both institutional and interpersonal within society. And then you had the Brown Berets. And the Brown Berets were this group of Chicanx youth who dressed in military attire, and they helped serve as sort of the security force for Chicanx movement, and they protected them against things like police brutality or street terrorism. And you see that they actually worked with and were inspired by the Black Panthers at the time, which is interesting for a sociologist because you start to see these interconnections of social movements start to take place with Chicanx activism working alongside the Black freedom movement at the very same time, as well as other subparts of the civil rights movement like the American Indian movement, and working towards some similar goals. The Brown Berets also were an active force during the East LA blowouts in 1968. And this was then, and it continues to be now, the biggest, largest social uprising we have seen in this country to this day, where students were coming together in solidarity and protesting the opportunity gap and achievement gap in education. What's interesting here for a sociologist is that you had Chicanos in LA form alliances domestically, but they also were forming connections throughout the world with other countries who identified together as the third world left. And then you start to notice some parallels. So for instance, in East LA, you had these huge blowouts in 1968. In that very same year, 1968, Mexico experienced their own largest student uprising, and they called it the Movimiento Estudiantil, the student movement. And so you notice these very different societies going through a very similar socio-political moment in time. And the connections didn't stop there. Argentina had a huge student movement. Chile had a huge student uprising. Brazil had a huge student uprising. In fact, it goes on and on. In 1968 would go down as the biggest global student uprising that we have seen in the world to this day. This is why it's often referred to as the year that changed the world. And at the root of all of that were student activists, were people like you who were driving these changes, coming together and changing the world. And so this was happening actually all over the world, not just in Latin America. You also saw it in Germany and France and in other places of the world. But for Latinx activism, it took on a very specific dimension. And in fact, these interconnected student uprisings that took place, even though they were part of this, this larger global moment that we were having, they became sort of a vortex, a catalyst for solidifying a certain vein of Latinx activism, which I would now turn my attention to. Next slide, please.
Oh my God.
Do you recognize him? So it was in this global moment of this global revolutionary left of the 1960s that Latinx activists and intellectuals set out to re-envision these new forms of transnational solidarity and unity across borders. Going back to, again, Trustee Gabriela's comment about solidarity here, right? In Latin America, there sort of emerges this, this North-South conflict against US imperialism and the notion of the third world and this hierarchy of countries throughout the world that came about after the Cold War. And it was around this time that you start to see a lot of grassroots Marxist type revolutions start to pop up all throughout Latin America, many of them drawing inspirations from the Cuban Revolution. And for instance, you had a civil war, grassroots-led civil war in Guatemala. You also had guerrilla-type uprisings in Chile and Venezuela and Honduras. In the Dominican Republic, you had this military coup against the government. So it's all over Latin America. And there was this form of presenting themselves as people in Latin America as a united front. And this is actually where it drew its strengths, from this international solidarity among Latin America and among people who were willing to think of Latin America as a whole, as opposed to these isolated silos. And one of the most well-known figures, which I know at least one of you recognized, was Che Guevara. It's almost, I find it really difficult to talk about Latinx activism in the 60s without reference to Che Guevara, because he was one of the most well-known revolutionaries at the time. And even to this day, I still see a lot of students with his face on t-shirts and things like that. But for the sake of keeping to that 15-minute time period, I will just say that he was a radical revolutionary from Argentina, and he played a pivotal role in the Cuban Revolution. And he attempted to export the revolution throughout all of Latin America. It's worth noting that Che Guevara himself became radicalized in his efforts after moving through different parts of Latin America when he was a medical student. And so he got to see firsthand the amount of political repression and economic misery that people were experiencing across borders. And so when you think of Latinx activism, he sort of becomes this metaphor for that solidarity and that transnationalism that was erupting. Blurring the boundaries from all the way from Mexico to South America, including the Caribbean. And this presentation of this part of the world as an area that was its own and as an area that needed to come together for a similar cause. And so Latinx activism is about national liberation, yes, but it's also about this much larger global liberation in which you see a ton of nations and countries coming together and sharing a history of struggle. And that struggle might look different in unique countries and nations in which it took place, but they still shared in their felt sense of proletarization and dispossession. Excuse me. And in Latin America, in this particular time and in this particular place, they actually had a lot of influence of religion, which I know seems counterintuitive because most people associate institutionalized religion with a lot more conservative politics. But again, in this time and in this place, because we're considering context, there was this push to work for and support the poor and to bring about better social change. And this was a moment in time in which you saw a lot of Catholics become radicalized. It was called liberation theology. And people were working off of a commitment to things like socialism or armed. Of that is a Colombian priest who was also, by the way, a sociologist. As a sociologist, I just want to plug that in. He founded sociology in Colombia. His name was Camilo Torres. And in the 60s, he joined the National Liberation Army, and he ended up fighting and dying in 1966 for his perceived injustices that he saw. And so he really becomes this symbol for Catholic activism at the time. And let's see, I think that should be it for this slide. You see the 60s are this time period of extreme injustices and huge social, cultural, political uprisings and mobilizations drawing from the Cuban Revolution all the way to the legend of Che Guevara, to liberation theology. And at the root of it and pushing this forward were student activists. They were pushing this moment forward, which I think there should be one more slide. So now you see the legacy. So we're drawing a lot on the legacy of Latinx activism today and what that means for us now. And we see that we are working on the legacy of Latinx activism in very similar ways. So in the ways that we talk about race relations, for instance, we see a fundamental change in how, especially this year, how we talk about race relations and social justice. And we see, again, this sort of trans-racial and trans-ethnic alliance that we're forging with things like the Black Lives Matter movement, in which you see people coming together in solidarity for common interests and common goals. And not only that, it's also focused on immigration, because a lot of the Latinx activism is focused on immigration rights today. And so again, that echoes the 1960 movement of working across borders and in this transnational format, right? Because you're working for immigration rights, including, of course, DACA-related issues. And also this cultivating this greater understanding that there are social forces in place that often lead people to immigrate to the United States. For instance, some people might have been fleeing because of the movements that we just talked about, or because of civil unrest in their countries, or because of financial, like failed economic neoliberal policies like NAFTA, for instance, which ended up leaving a ton of Mexican Americans for sure, but also some some South Americans heavy hit financially because of these policies, so they end up immigrating. And so immigration doesn't just happen in a vacuum, it's connected to larger social patterns and forces. And as a sociologist, I just have to kind of connect those dots and say, this is where they're coming from, and it's a system, right? It's a structure. And we also see a greater understanding and a building on the legacy of Latinx activism in academia. The fact that you can now take a Latinx class or an ethnic studies class, like a Chicano studies class, for instance, is a direct result of past Latinx activism in education. So we see evidence and vestiges of previous acts of political action and unity. And even like participating in this webinar, for instance, it's not just passively learning about Latinx activism, it's actually actively participating in and supporting Latinx activism, because we communicate our values with our time, right? So we are here and we're supporting this movement, and we're coming there and we're talking about what is important to us. And I'm so excited to see where this continues to go. And I know that we have a lot of wonderful things happening at Ventura College that really is empowering our students to give them a voice in higher education and to give them a place in creating a college experience that is representative of their struggles and of their experience. And in conversations like this, how we give homage to the differences and disparity of people's experiences. And I'm so honored that I got to be a small part of it today. So that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Graves, in sharing with us your wonderful, the education that you provide your students, sharing that with us. It is very empowering, especially from a student perspective, knowing that my roots don't just come from, activism that happened here in the US, but also activism that happened in places such as Latin America. So thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing you to someone very important, Dr. Pena. Dr. Pena began his role as our Vice President for Student Affairs in July of 2016. Dr. Pena served as the Associate Vice President for Student Affairs at California State University from 2007 to 2016. Prior to Channel Islands even, he served as a Senior Director of Academic Programs at California Lutheran University from 1997 to 2007. Dr. Pena is a first-generation college student who is actively involved in the community and is a proud graduate of Ventura College. He concurrently serves as the Dean of Student Services for the campus. He is involved on a state and national level as a member of NASPA, which is the Western Regional Board of Directors. On a personal level, his commitment to supporting the inclusion of Latinx and other historically marginalized student groups is grounded in his desire to give back to this community. He was born in and raised in Oxnard, and worked directly for 21 years with underserved student populations in higher education, including first-generation low-income and Latinx students. He is a father to a son with nonverbal autism and an active member in the disability community of Ventura County. Together, these personal experiences have led him to support students of all backgrounds with compassion. It is an honor to introduce you, Dr. Pena, and now can you please take it away? You're on mute.
So I'm going to see if I can share my screen, if that's okay with you, Libby. Let's do that.
Okay.
Oops, I got an alert. I'm sharing. Oh, there you go. Can you see everything? Did I get out of the thing? Okay.
Also,
Thank you, Liv. Let me try to share.
okay. Okay.
Thank you. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. David Pena. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs, and I am so honored to come and be a part of the Latinx Heritage Month celebration. This has been one of the dreams that I've had since I've been here at Ventura College, to have a month-long celebration, and we've been able to finally develop that, and I'm so blessed and thanks to be able to be here. I definitely want to give homage to Alan Salazar for his blessing this afternoon. I thought that was poignant. I think it's really important for us to give thanks to the heritage and the land that we are sitting on, our Shumash land. And so I really do appreciate that. Trustee Torres, I really do appreciate your reminding everyone that our voice is important. And I really do encourage our students to use their voice. As well as Dr. Graves, you're phenomenal. I felt like I was back in Chicano studies at CSUN. So I really do appreciate it. I was charged today with talking about my educational journey as a Latino administrator and a Latino educator in Ventura County. And so I wanted to give you a little history about who I am and what makes me who I am. And then also the other charge was to talk a little bit about our opportunities as an HSI and what that means for Ventura College and what we plan to do in the future. So if you'll indulge me for the next 9 minutes, I'd like to be able to do that. Pictures say 1,000 words, so I do have limited words, but a lot of graphics. So welcome to my journey of my educational experience as a Latino administrator in Ventura County. So how a little boy from Oxnard became Vice President of Ventura College's VPSA. That's my kindergarten picture. You gotta love the lapel. It was in fashion at the time. So who am I? I have identifiers, and I think that's one of the things that really binds us as a community, as a culture. A lot of times our faculty members or our classified professionals will ask us, like, how do you identify yourself? And so I'm a very proud first-generation college student. I'm very proud of my heritage. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm an educator and an advocate. And one of my biggest goals in life that I have is to assist in helping students make meaning of their educational journey, leadership experiences, and opportunities. And that's actually really important because that actually drives the work that I do as the Vice President for Student Affairs at Ventura College, but also how I truly encourage that we put the students at the center of everything that we do. So I knew I wanted to go to college. That's me, senior year picture. That's me at graduation with my nana and my mom. And I chose Ventura College. And I was actually a staff writer at the VC Prep. So that's actually one of the articles that I wrote when I was a student here in 1900. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to come back to the institution where I started my educational journey because I knew I always wanted to go to college. I'm a very proud first-generation college student. That's a picture at my master's graduation from Arizona State University, and my mom and my dad, and who didn't graduate from high school. So I am the first to go to college, and I get to take advantage of a lot of different opportunities. I was very fortunate in 8th grade to take advantage of Future Leaders of America, the Latino Youth Leadership Organization. They sent me to Washington. I got to have lunch with the president of Turkey when I was 13 years old. And that's me that's me right here. So a lot of things have changed, but it really does allow me the opportunity to continue to support the efforts of our Latino community. And then this is a picture of my parents with my son at his first Halloween, you know, and it's like it's generational. And I think it's an amazing opportunity for us to make sure that we share in the cultures that we have, whether they be American culture like Halloween, or whether it be an opportunity to have your child have a strong connection with their grandparents, because I think that the narrative from our generations is so important. I'm an educated Latino. I came to Ventura College. I was a part of ASBC. I was a member of MECHA, and I took what changed my experience was I took a Chicano studies course with Maya de la Rocha. And he is by far one of the biggest influences in my life. And I had the chance to talk with him and meet with him and work with him. And he wrote me a letter of recommendation to go to, or a letter of rec to go to Northridge. And he inspired me, actually. It was a field trip that I took in my Chicano studies course to go to LACMA. And I had an opportunity to sit with him on the bus. And he talked to me about the Chicano movement. He talked to me about the oppression, because I was so in need of learning more about my history in order to really understand who I was. Went to CSUN, and I graduated with my degree in Chicano studies. I did. And I was there in 1994, my senior year, the year of the 187, the year of the earthquake. My senior year, I had one of my classes, my research methods class was in the football field with a rolling chalkboard, and I got to see FEMA work, and I got to see social work, and I got to see how there were so many members of our community who were helping each other out. So I went to Arizona State University, and I got a full ride because I was a Latino going into a social service area, Project 1000, and I had my ability to work and be a part of the Latino community, serving as a master of social work, doing my internship, getting my license actually to be an LCSW. And I wrote my master's thesis on the effects of self-efficacy on elementary Latino students, and it was a great opportunity. Graduated from CLU, very proud graduate of CLU. Did my dissertation on the success of Latino male student leaders at four-year institutions, and I got to do interviews with students who really helped to inform me to become a better leader, but also really enrich the literature that was lacking on our Latino leaders, male student leaders on college campuses. And so I'm really, really proud of that. As Nathan said, because Nathan is amazing, I did 10 years at CLU, did upper bound programs, worked primarily with our first generation low income programs, moved for 9 years at Cal State Channel Islands. I was there at the very beginning, so it was a great opportunity to build traditions and build a sense of culture. And now I get to celebrate. I'm in my 5th year at Ventura College, and it has been such a rewarding experience. Loving husband. I give it all to my family. We are a Mexican-Cuban family. I married a very strong Latina doctora who graduated from USC, who is a published author, best-selling author for these books that she has there. And together we get to inform and celebrate not only our culture, but also the fact that we get to contribute to the livelihood and support of our community. And that is something that is extremely rooted. I love the Mexican-Cuban thing. That's what we call our son. So I'll talk about that in a second. This is my parents, my family. You know, I'm the only one of I'm the only one of the oldest of 4, the only one to go to college, the only one of my first generation of cousins, the second generations of cousins. But you know what? Those second generations of cousins, they now come and ask how my student or my son or your cousin can come back to college. So I give my support to my familia because my familia is my rock. I'm a proud father. I got to tell you, like Nathan said, I have a son who's autistic nonverbal, best-selling author for Anatomy of Autism, Diego Pena, sold 6 million copies on Amazon. It's $8 if you want to go get it. And you know, this is something that is I get to still share. This is a picture of my dad and my son before we went to a basketball fundraiser. And you know, they're so proud of institutions, and they're so proud of our college, you know, that I get to support them and they get to support me. And I find that just really rewarding. And he's actually the thing that drives me. I'm also an autism advocate. You know, my son is autistic nonverbal. My wife is an amazing researcher in autism research. Actually one of the leading researchers in the Western states. And so together we get to be a united force. So we get to do presentations in English and in Spanish. My wife does the Spanish. But we get to do those things to help our other community members help learn more about the resources and help guide them in their ways. So this is what we think a VP does, because that's my role. I'm a VP of Student Affairs. This is what a lot of people think that we do. We're just going out, doing presentations, sitting in meetings, you know, talking about policy and programs. But I gotta tell you, this is, oh, no, 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 no. All right, well, it was a video of a kid getting kind of smacked around a little bit. So I apologize if it's not working, but Libby has my presentation if you'd like to see that. A little bit of lessons learned. I got to tell you, I dealt with the imposter syndrome, and I have dealt with that since I went to Ventura College as a student, not thinking that I belonged here, not thinking that I was worthy enough. I had the grades, I had all these other things, but I gotta tell you, I did never feel like I belonged because I didn't feel like I had the right to belong. I felt that I had a seat at the table, but I didn't feel like I had a voice. And I have to tell you, that persisted all until today, really. My first year as a vice president for student affairs at Ventura College, I had a goatee because I wanted to make myself look older. I would sit at an exec team meeting and go, I can't believe I'm sitting here. They're listening to my words. They're listening to what I have to say. I can give a comment. And so you have to really find your voice, but you know it, you have to have a strong team who supports you in order to do that. And I am so fortunate to have such a strong team with the exec team here, who allow me to have my voice, who allow me to have my indiscretions, or allow me to have my differences of opinions, but it's respected. And it kind of hits you like, oh my gosh, like I do belong here. Like, I know a lot of people will tell you like, oh, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring up a chair. I totally respect that. But once you have the ability to sit at the table and your chair is offered to you, then make sure that you take advantage to use it, because that is so important. The other lesson learned is I have a coconut picture, because I have to tell you how many times I've been called a coconut. I'm a light-skinned Mexican-American man. My dad was from Durango. My eyes are light brown. And you're like, you're not Mexican enough. I don't speak Spanish well enough. You can't do this. And it's interesting that you get it from not only the outside community, but your own community. And I think that it has taken 48 years of my life to come into ownership of my reality. And yeah, I may have light skin, and my Spanish may not be great. And yeah, my son can type Spanish better than I can. But I think you have to really understand the strength that you have and the ability that you have and the confidence that you need to have to be able to excel and be cool with who you are, especially in this environment. Like, stand true, like Trustee Torres says, stand true to your values, stand true to your ideals, stand true to who you are, because I think that's going to really help make sure that you make a difference. Lastly, that's a little bit about me. You wanted to know a little bit about what it means to be a Hispanic serving institution, because Ventura College is kicking butt and taking names in a lot of ways, but we have a lot of way to grow. So a Hispanic serving institution is a federal law, and it's given to an accredited degree granting public institution. There were 539 institutions last year in 2019, and Ventura College is one of them. The requirement is that 25% or more of undergraduate Hispanic enrollment, FTE, are student enrolled. At Ventura College last year, we had 63.5 folks. So we are more than double. And so we are a Hispanic serving institution, and very proud of that. And there is a significance about being a Hispanic serving institution. And I use that word very seriously. It's a significant designate, because you're designated by the federal government. You have the eligibility to apply for federal grants. And we did do that. We did that in 2015. And it's a designation that should be used to raise community awareness that serves both Hispanics and non-Hispanics in pursuing a greater education, and also create services that meet a variety of their needs. And I gotta tell you, that really aligns very well with our mission of the institution. And lastly, Ventura College as a Hispanic serving institution. At VC, we understand that being named a Hispanic serving institution should be about more than just a quota. It should be how we define and how we purpose the things that we're planning on doing. We're not only focusing on enrollments, we're actually looking at retention and what services, what programs, what classes, what courses, what curriculum we can create in order to retain and ensure graduation of our students. And it's an important thing to remember that we are not just, our grants are not just for our Latino students. They are actually for the greater good, because we want to make sure, because we also know, and the research shows, that the work that you do to support a Latino student is going to benefit the greater good, and they will both coalesce in a great sense of community. We're committed to researching grant opportunities, and that is one of the goals. And we had an exec team the other day, and we talked about how we are intent on researching grant opportunities for Title V. And then, of course, continue to include our HSI status in the college missions, core values, strategic goals through campus forums and departmental dialogue. I think that that's important because we want to make sure that not only do we talk about being an HSI, but how do we incorporate the work that we're doing in the services that we're providing, especially as we're going towards really creating a strong anti-racism initiatives and programs to better serve our campus community. That's me, folks. Leaders never stop learning. And that was one of the really good quotes that I went to a CSSO conference, like Chief Student Affairs Office, and they said, you know, we're no longer using cultural competency because that means that you're already competent in developing a sense of cultural inequities and all these other things. What you might want to think about is cultural humility, because cultural humility allows you the opportunity to continue to learn. And I think that that's something that's really important. Thank you, Libby, for the opportunity. Thank you, Nathan, for the opportunity to share. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Pena, for sharing your wonderful journey and the wonderful information of Ventura College being a Hispanic Serving Institute. I know a lot of students are unaware of that, but now I know that when word gets out, we're going to be super proud of who we are, where we come from, and knowing what kind of community and knowing what kind of leaders that we have. So thank you again, Dr. Pena.
Thank you.
And now then, so students who attended today's Latinx Heritage Month webinar are eligible to win a free 32-ounce hydro flask. To enter to win, send Libby Fada a private message with your vccd.edu email address. Student email addresses will be drawn at a random following the webinar, and 4 students will win each week. So if you are a student, just privately message my advisor, Libby Fada, with your VCCD email, and you'll have a chance to win at least one of 4 hydro flasks that are 2 ounces. And so next up, week 4 will be on October the 7th, 2020, the history of the East Campus and the Santa Clara Valley. That is my campus that I represent, so I hope I see y'all over there. And week 5 will be followed by on October 14th, 2020, celebration of art and poetry, music, and dance. I hope to see you all there. It will be on the same time, on the same link. And thank you for showing up.
Thank you, everyone. It was wonderful. I loved our speakers, Dr. Graves, Dr. Pena, Trustee Torres. I'm so proud to be part of Ventura College. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Hope to see you next week. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
You.
If you're interested in participating in the raffle, please send me your VCCD email address so I can include you. Thank you. All I need is your email address at this time.
Do we type it in the chat, or I wasn't able to hear the last part that he was saying?
Yeah, if you can just send me a private message in the chat and just send me your VCCD email address. That's all I need. I don't need any 900 numbers or names at this time. I will reach out for that information if you're a winner. So,
okay, thank you. I'll send it right now. Thank you. And there's gonna be another speech next Wednesday too.
Yeah, there's 2 more. So there's one next Wednesday, October 7th, and then the last one is October 14th, both starting at noon. So next week will be on the history of the East Campus and the Santa Clara Valley, and then the one on the 14th will be on art and culture. And it'll be,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank
and the
you.
hydro class, yeah, of course. And the giveaway will be at those as well.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
good
Have
one.
a nice day. Thank
You
you.
too. Bye.